But it's not just the SRBMs, because what you're seeing today is what appears to be the beginning of an expansion of the range of their precision strike capability, not just the 600 kilometer to 1,000 kilometer range DF-15, aka CSS-6, or the DF-11A, aka CSS-7, but now increasingly looking at conventionally capable DF-21, aka CSS-5, ballistic missiles that can extend to a range of at least 1,700 kilometers, and with increasing precision. The DF-21C, of course, is the latest deployed variant of a ballistic missile that took a JL-1 that took a long time to be able to develop it. It took quite a while to get this capability out. When I say conventionally capable, it means that it's capable, and this reflects a change in doctrine of both nuclear and conventional missions, which adds another complication to this whole equation. But they're also looking at follow-on variants of every single missile they have in the inventory. This goes back to the days of former Assistant to Military Commission individual named Nie Rong-jun, who developed a research and development policy called 3 moves on a chessboard, which means that you have 3 systems or 3 variants of a particular system in the research and development or R&D cycle at any one time. So right now, for example, you have the DF-11A deployed. Odds are there's a DF-11B out there somewhere. Right now, for example, you have a DF-15B, which is a terminally guided variant of the DF-15, 600 kilometer to 1,000 kilometer range ballistic missile. Odds are you have a DF-21C out there. And so part of the exercise here was to be able to look at how you can tell if there's, for example, a new variant that's being deployed, and how you can tell what brigade is going to get it. Part of this study also was be able to look at the infrastructure, is to look at the organization of the second artillery, the conventional second artillery. That starts, of course, with headquarters in Beijing, but then also goes to 6 missile bases, launch bases. And I say missile bases is because this is opposed to the 1 nuclear warhead storage base in the Qinling Mountains, about 100 kilometers west of Xi'an, where they centrally store their nuclear warheads with a limited number stored at each base as well. But so with that as a lead-in, there are 3 different types of ballistic missiles or theater missiles being deployed within the whole expanse of China. The first being the short-range ballistic missiles, second, medium range, and then the third are the ground-launched cruise missiles, as well as a air-launched variant launched off the bombers. With the SRBMs, you have 5 brigades, and a brigade is the basic unit of firepower unit within the second artillery. A brigade will have 6 battalions, and within a battalion you'll have 2 companies for a total of 12 units, in which each company having at least 2 launchers, possibly 3, as it's really not quite certain. But so when you add them together in terms of this 1,300 missiles, this is really what's more important is the infrastructure that's there. Because there's something about, I don't know if it's a status or prestige thing, but in general you have at least one brigade in almost every single province of China. For example, with a few exceptions. For example, Heilongjiang doesn't have one, Ningxia doesn't have one, and of course Sichuan doesn't have one. And there are a couple. You have two or three brigades. But with the ballistic missiles in Southeast China, 5 different brigades. And that deployed one by one. The first 2, of course, were the DF-15, and the latter 3, the DF-11. But of course, a constant cycle of upgrading them. Now, what's interesting is that when you look at the 5 brigades, like the nuclear warhead side, you do have a special unit under the 52 base in Southeast China that centrally stores most of the missiles, the ballistic missiles. That facilitates maintenance, for example, and other things, with annexes also in Anhui province and Jiangxi province. So one of the points is later is that when there's a call, for example, for the PRC to withdraw missiles, if you take that in a literal sense, what you're talking about is really this one regiment, this storage regiment. But a more substantive way to look at the issue about withdrawing missiles is to look at the infrastructure. Because really what you're looking at is withdrawal of the brigades, the 5 brigades eventually, in order to create some stability in the Taiwan Strait. But beyond SRBMs is medium-range ballistic missiles. This is a little bit more difficult to be able to calculate which brigades, medium-range missile brigades, still have the nuclear-only variant, which is the DF-21A, which ones are now moving the DF-21C. The DF-21C was highlighted in the parade last October. a picture of which, of course, is on the cover of the paper. But in general, you can have a general sense of what is going to be upgraded to the next variant, which is the DF-21C, by examining, sort of reading between the lines and looking at open source materials. Because when you see a new brigade that shows up at a particular city, especially one that is adjacent to, if not co-located with, an existing unit with a similar variant, generally that means that that is a new unit that whose job it is to be able to integrate that new ballistic missile into the inventory. As of right now, there are three that one can say with a high degree of certainty, that three brigades that are equipped with the conventional capable DF-21C, one in Laifu, and two possibly down opposite Taiwan. In general, when there's calls to withdraw missiles, generally what you're talking about are the missiles that are most obviously directed against Taiwan, which are the SRBMs, or short-range ballistic missiles. But the general trend is to be able to replace the existing DF-21As with dual-capable variants. There are some issues and some questions because the DF-21A has a 3,000-kilometer range, and the C has a 1,700-kilometer range. That you have some sacrifice in range. But that's a general sort of note on the DF-21, and I'll come back to the variant, the generation after next, the anti-ship ballistic missile, in just a second. What's often forgotten, though, is another type of missile that in many ways is at least as lethal as a ballistic missile, if not more so, because of the difficulties of intercepting them. One would think that a land attack cruise missile is relatively easy to intercept because it moves fairly slow, for example, at Mach 0.8, not like a ballistic missile that we're traveling at least at Mach 5, if not Mach 10, in the reentry phase. But with a land attack cruise missile, what makes it so difficult is because of the low altitude. And that requires an elevated sensor to be able to look down to overcome line of sight limitations. Because if you don't have an elevated sensor, you generally will not be able to see that land attack cruise missile coming until it's just right over line of sight, and it's difficult to be able to engage at that particular point. So, but the combination of land attack cruise missiles with ballistic missiles makes a very, very difficult defense, very challenging for defenses. Right now, within the 2nd Artillery, you have at least 2, if not 3, brigades that are that have been formed or in the process of being formed, and most of them are in central China. This does not mean that they necessarily launch from there, because they are mobile and rapid reaction units and are able to deploy any place that is necessary. So it's a very interesting development. But going back now to another sort of the next generation, which is another variant of the DF-21. That has at least about a 1,700-kilometer range, if not more, because there are indications that one of the goals is actually to extend the range out to 3,000 kilometers to match that old DF-21 variant, DF-21A. With 3,000 kilometers, it allows you to get to Guam. From certain locations, with 3,000 kilometers, depending on where you deployed, it allows you to get to New Delhi. From the 1,700 kilometers, of course, it allows you to span the entire country of Japan. But what you're seeing now is a development of a maritime variant of a medium-range ballistic missile. Technologically, which is not unprecedented, because the Soviets back in the old days had a similar program. Of course, that was nuclear tipped. It didn't have to have the accuracy requirements. But what you're seeing is now, like, for example, an anti-satellite capability, or, for example, a ballistic missile defense capability, a hit-to-kill, an equivalent of a hit-to-kill capability on a ballistic missile to go against a moving target at sea. Very technologically challenging, but something that's not undoable. And certainly the China's space and missile industry and designers are working very hard to be able to develop one. And with what the commander of Pacific Command discussed, was it a month ago or so, or a couple months ago, that it's already reached the testing stage. A motor, there were indications of a motor, the motor dedicated to the missile already being, the factory, or a new manufacturing facility already being developed and completed last year. So odds are what you're seeing now in terms of testing is a testing of flight tests of the motor itself and the airframe. And of course, the next step and the final step would be most likely going against a target at sea in a realistic environment. Now, now with this in mind, odds are, because what generally happens within the 2nd Artillery is when they enter the research and development cycle, when there's funding dedicated, when they move out from the initial phase and move towards significant expenditures to be able for research and development, normally there is a seed unit that's established, a sort of the genesis of a brigade.